Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this customer journey orchestration part two, which is on the subject of data. If you were signed up for the session originally a couple of weeks ago, apologies, we had to move it, but you get the full experience today. So, in part one, we spoke about the building blocks of customer journey orchestration. So, the kind of things you need to be thinking about in order to start uh, acting as a sort of digital concierge for your customers, so providing the right experience at the right time. And what we're going to do today is have a look at the data models that sit behind it. Now, this can be a little bit of a dry subject, so I'm not going to go into massive depth technically into this, um, but it'll give you an understanding, I guess, of some of the concepts and fundamentals that we talk to our own clients about when they're starting to think about journey orchestration. So I've got data sat in different systems, different platforms. It's not connected. It's not necessarily permissioned correctly. We don't know how to use it. Um, and so, what we're going to look at today is some of the ways in which we can approach that kind of conundrum. Some of the things you can think about, some of the tools that will help you to do that. And yeah, hopefully give you a bit of inspiration and I guess some of those basics and maybe some more advanced things that perhaps for example, some of our own clients wish they'd known before they work with us. So it's a bit of a data for dummies for customer journey orchestration. Just a quick recap of who we are. So we're journey orchestration experts. Our role within our client organizations is to help them architect, plumb in the right data and platforms, and then serve the right experiences to their customers. So we work across multiple different platforms, so we're actually almost platform agnostic from that point of view. And we help them really solve this puzzle by taking them from almost a standing start through to maturity over a couple of years. So, as I said, today we're talking about connecting data. We're going to talk about the three elements of a connected data stack, moving from concept, so almost a starting point, through to how you would scale, some of the challenges that come with that. The role of a customer data platform and understanding customer journey is really important to then understanding how you want to shuffle data around in order to serve the customer experience. I'm going to touch on master data management a bit later on. I'm not going to go into huge depth because it's more of a sort of IT and more wider organization initiative. But it is important to understand its role within what we do within marketing. And then just a quick summary at the end. So why are we talking about data? Because data is obviously the basis for customer journey orchestration. Without data, we can't do it. But it also feeds other things. I mean, something as simple as running a campaign. We want to be able to pull a real-time list of our target audiences and maybe segment that target audience even further into people that we want to serve different offers to, which want to treat in different ways, push into different funnels, and so on. So data is at the basis of all that, and being able to share it around different platforms and channels in theory is not too complicated. Where we start to run into problems is where we have inconsistency of data, fragmented data, the cost of maintaining integrations, and so on. And I'll cover that as we go through the presentation today. But I'll start by just talking about the three elements of a connected data stack. And I guess from more basic through to more complex. So if we start with your average marketer, what are they dealing with day to day? Well, it's usually locally held data, by which I mean it's data that's held within platforms. So that could be the website, so content management system, a digital experience platform like Adobe or Sitecore or Optimizely, something like that. Could be an email platform, it could be a social media amplification platform, could even be CRM. Um, Obviously, we're holding a lot of data in there. While it's not necessarily a digital platform, we might want to be using a lot of that data. We might consider that important for use within the digital world. So locally held data is used for collecting and activating data locally, usually. So within our website team, we are probably serving, A/B tests, personalized experiences, that sort of thing. Within the email team, we're creating sequenced email flows, we're doing A/B testing, and so on. So we tend to sort of work within that sphere of what we can control. So we're using data that we're holding natively. Now that's, as we get a little bit more mature, we might start integrating, for example, website and email. But generally, most of our work is going to be done within that local channel. We might be integrating data with a master data management platform such as a CRM or a data lake. We might be integrating with a customer data platform, but as we get more mature, we'll be looking at those kind of tools. Um, the step above that, and I'll visualize this in a second, is the customer data platform. Now, most of you have probably heard about CDPs and what they are. So there's loads out there now, some of the best known, Telium, Bloomreach, Adobe, Salesforce Data Cloud, and so on. And these are created for the use of marketers to unify and activate customer data. So they're really marketing-based platforms, and their whole use case is designed around what marketers are trying to do day to day with their jobs. It might not be managed by marketing people. It might be managed by a marketing operations team because of the interactivity of that platform with all the other platforms within the business. But the idea is that it should be used and the data activated by marketers. So the ability to go in and create lists or create audiences or view analytics about audiences and so on. So it's primarily a marketing tool. And it could, well, it will integrate data within the channels that you're using, website, email, and so on. But it could also be interacting with other platforms. So in the context of what we're talking about today, that could be our master data management platform. And our master data management platform, well, it could actually be multiple platforms. So master data management is a bit of a sort of broad-ranging term. It could, in one organization, just be a CRM, and that could just be your master data, single source of truth. That's where you store everything. But you could also, in a larger organization, have SAP in there for financials or product management or other ERPs that you're using to store products or supply chain data or customer data, whatever else it could be. It could also be a data lake. So you could be pushing everything into a data lake. So master data management has a few different sort of concepts and definitions. But the idea being it's rather than being a marketing tool, it's the enterprise-wide single source of truth. So it's something that the customer data platform feeds off and potentially pushes data back into. And it's where everyone in the organization can go and see in a single view, any information about a product, about a user, and so on. Could also be when we're running analytics about propensity to buy, modeling different kind of audience segments. We might be doing all of that sort of stuff within a master data platform. So it's a centralized organizational repository, and it's not just used by marketing. Like I said, it's used by multiple different stakeholders. So those are the three levels that we have. And just to visualize that, I mean, this is in an ideal world, what the business would have is those channels with locally held data, our customer data platform, feeding those and ingesting data back from them, and then sitting above all that, the master data management layer, where our single source of truth of the organization sits. So now we've got that out of the way. So those are three data stores. There's potentially other types as well, but again, most of the clients we work with will be working within this sort of model. Let's just talk very quickly about locally held data. If anybody on the call today has been playing around with personalization, A/B testing, I imagine some of you have, you'll know, I'll be familiar with the concepts of basic website personalization. And I showed a little bit of this in the last webinar. So, our holiday company who have got just very generic messaging on their homepage about winter sun, handpicked destinations. Well, within a website, you have a whole heap of rules that you can use that's within the marketer's control to try and start personalizing the experience for that user. So in this case, our user has chosen 2 adults, 2 children. Well, that's great because that instantly tells us that we're dealing with a family booker. So the next time that person comes back to the website, we can change that messaging and just say free lounge access, fast track security, i.e., we know you've got kids. Let's try and get you through the most horrible part of the holiday as quickly as possible. So that's just using locally held data. We're not integrating any other data at this point. Similarly, if we're running an email campaign, we might have, if we've got any level of maturity, some sort of automation going on there where we're taking people through a flow based on whether they've engaged or not, or whether they've undertaken certain actions. But again, this is all just done within an email tool like Eloqua or any other tool out there you can think of that has marketing automation. It's all held and done within that. So at the moment we're looking at local data, sorry, but done in a very siloed way, but probably still seeing more results than just doing straightforward generic experience. So if we think then about all the things that we can do through a website, so whether you're working with Sitecore, Adobe, Optimizely, or anything like that, they'll all have a similar set of personalization conditions that by which you can target your users. So it could be in session, across session, could be number of times visited, device used, purchase behavior, existing versus new customer, and so on. So we've got all, usually in something like Sitecore, we've got 100+ rules. We can create bespoke rules as well if we want to. And then with an email, we might have those typical metrics such as opened, engaged, what kind of campaign are they interested in, what links are they clicking, lead scoring, personalization by interest, product recommendations, and the people might be also updating their marketing preferences. So if we're looking at data for journey orchestration in its simplest form, and we just want to get going with something, we might have a look at this and say, well, okay, there's obvious things we can do to connect up our website and email journeys. So from a data governance point of view, we've got marketing preferences there within email. Well, why don't we use those within the website to personalize to that user? If we're capturing that information and we've got permission to use it, let's use it to drive personalization on site as well. If we're doing lead scoring on both website and email, then why aren't we combining those? Similarly, if we have someone who's expressing interest in the campaign, well, they're clicking on an email link, for example, then we can create use cases on the website to say, okay, let's start personalizing for this user based on what they're doing through our email channel. So this kind of project, if you like, to get to this point, if you're just using campaign codes, you could probably do it today. So let's send an email to a user. If they click on a certain product link, we can use a campaign code behind that to when they hit the website, we can recognize that, and then we can trigger a personalization rule to them. Very simple use case. If we wanted to start doing combinations of lead scoring, if we want to start doing marketing preference sharing, you could be into a 2, 3, 4 week project, but the value of that could be significant and fairly low effort. And we're only looking at 2 channels at this point. But what we also, of course, have are potentially multiple other platforms such as CRM. And I'm sorry about the texty slide, but so where we've got things like full purchase history, offline interactions, average spend, whether they're a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead. So therefore, do we want to take on to slightly different journeys within our channels? Even down to things like where they're based, we might have custom data fields in there as well that aren't currently used by the website and email. So already we've added another channel in, but there's heaps of historical data here. Could also be modeling data that we want to use and trigger things within our other channels as well. So we can do a concept really easily, but often the most useful information we have about a user is shared across multiple different channels, and we need to find a way to collate that, unify and activate it. So if we take again, that simple use case. So let's say we're on a standing start. We want to start doing some joining up between our channels. So we just want to say if someone clicks on a link within an email, we want to promote the same product category on the homepage banner on the next visit. So really, really simple use case. What do we need to do that? Well, we need some sort of integration between email and on-site, and not necessarily even integration. It could just be using, like I said, a campaign code. In which case, in something like the Sitecore world, it could just be recognized in the URL that a user comes from, and then just saying, okay, change the banner out for that user. If we want to get more clever, and if we've got a scenario where a lot of our users are logged in, for example, or we can match them via an email address, we can build that integration out to say, okay, this user has just been sent to the website. Tell me a bit more about them, email platform, so that I can then do more to personalize with them on site. So a relatively simple scenario there. Again, this is a fairly small scale project, a bit of development involved perhaps. As we start introducing more platforms, the complexity of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to integrate in terms of data becomes naturally more complex as well. So whereas we just had potentially even a 1 or 2-way integration, we've now, if we start bringing other channels, just 4 channels here, we've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 integrations, and any of those could be 1 or 2 ways. So immediately we've got an awful lot of integrations we need to start managing. And so it does work at small scale, but these integrations all need to be built. More to the point, they need to be managed. So any change to data schema or to the integration method or anything like that, that all needs to be managed, maintained. It starts to get quite time consuming and expensive, and someone needs to own this, so that things don't start breaking as more capability is unleashed by one of the channels, or like I said, the way we collect data changes. Therefore, that needs to waterfall into everything else we do. We're obviously going to be collecting different data. So a salesperson in a CRM system is going to be collecting quite different data potentially to someone who's just signed up to our email sign up form, because we want to get more data. We might be capturing it in different ways. We might have misspelt the company name, or shortened it, or we might have had a different email address from a person. So immediately we're starting to get more fragmented data as well. And as our marketing requirements mature, it means that the way in which we ingest and ingest data and use it changes as well. And so if we have a new marketing requirement, that's potentially then got to be developed across all those different integrations that we've got. And not to harp on too much about problems, but I mentioned briefly earlier record matching. So we're called ratio partners, but most people know us as ratio. So immediately, if I've got someone on the sales team who's calling me ratio, and then I've got a ratio partner's email address on a form that I've used, well, how the hell do we match those two up? It's quite difficult. So we need to start thinking about data cleansing tools that can allow us to do that. So record match is a big problem. So we end up with all sorts of duplicated data. It becomes really difficult to pull clean lists of who our users are. Permissions management for the same reason, really. So someone might have phoned up to say, take me off your mailing list. Well, okay, that's fine, but it might not have it might not have filtered through to the email team, or vice versa. And also because of that potential duplication of records, being able to manage permissions. So if I've unsubscribed from email, that might not have made it through to our CRM team who are doing postal communications, because the records don't match. So again, we need some way of doing that. And interaction tracking. So how do we? This is the subject for another day. But how do we attribute how our users got to a point of purchase? So where have they come from? What have they done? What channels have they engaged with? How do we pull that together when that information is all set in different systems? And then what's the governance around it? So who owns, for example, our core data profile that we want to have about every single customer? Is that a name, an email address, and a company? Is it a name, email, company, city? What is the core data we need to hold about all our users, and how do we standardize that across all our channels and in our master data management platforms that I'll talk about a bit later on? So yeah, what I'm getting to here is customer data platform, whilst not the elixir to every problem, is certainly going to go a long way to helping you solve a lot of these challenges, because it will help you to unify that data. And I'll just talk a bit more about what a customer data platform is. If you've heard of these before, you've heard of, like I said, the likes of Telium, Bloomreach, and so on, Twilio. There's a lot of benefits to using them. They have pre-built connectors generally to most major platforms. So if you have Dynamics or Salesforce or Eloqua or all these other platforms, the chances are that something like a Telium CDP will have a pre-built connector to that. So immediately you've removed that integration issue that we had previously. It's getting that data out of silos and bringing it into one place. So rather than having to integrate data between all these different platforms, well, what we're doing is we'll bring it to one centralized repository. Then we can start to make sense of it. We can start to centralize permission management. So if permissions do update in one place, then potentially, as far as we can, we will update it everywhere else, just through a single hub and spoke model. It allows us also to do more comprehensive profiling of customers. So rather than just having a single view of a customer who's interacting with our website, we can now see what they're doing across email, paid media, and everything else that we've got. So we have a much better view of what stage in their journey a user is with us. So consideration, purchase, post sales, and so on. We have a view of that through our customer data platform. We also have access to much richer analytics. So, and I'll show you this in a minute, but so within Telium, for example, you can see how different audiences are performing. Um, you can create segments of audiences and again see how those different types of audiences are performing. So it makes it much easier as a marketer to be able to make decisions about how you're going to spend money, where you're going to invest effort, rather than just looking at things in silos and trying to stitch it all together and make sense of it. And on that point, increased customer insights. I'll come on to a bit more about that in a minute. And also operational efficiencies. If we think about trying to run a campaign right now where we're trying to manually pull lists of data, we're trying to dedupe them, we're trying to filter them in Excel by certain categories or whatever it might be. The role of a CDP is to eliminate that effort and give you on-demand access to customer data. So it really is a magical thing for a marketer, but and it does drive customer experiences, but there are some downsides to it. Um, and if you're in a marketing team that's already flat out and already struggling to get going with something as simple as marketing automation with emails, you're probably looking at this and thinking, Christ, that's another platform we've got to use. And whilst a customer data platform is designed to be used by marketers, actually setting it up and configuring it can require quite a bit of manual and technical configuration. So Mario, my business partner Ratio, and we went to a Telium training course a few years ago, and I remember sitting there and we just sort of looked at each other after the first 2 hours and thought this is actually quite a bit more technical than we thought, and that's what our superb team is there to do. So the setup and configuration of these things is not necessarily easy, but actually once it's in motion and you have it set up in the way in which you need to use it, being able as a marketer to then go in and start pulling lists and badging customers and working out where you want to shove the data around is a lot easier. But it is a bit of a learning curve. It does require active management. So in the same way that you have lists within an email platform or you're managing rules for personalization within a website, you have those same challenges within a customer data platform. So setting up audiences, for example, doesn't sound like a massively onerous task, but actually, if you've got various different segments and operating potentially worldwide or whatever it might be, then all of a sudden you're into maybe quite a large user set of audiences you need to get set up. Um, and it's not just something you can just sit there and leave, especially when you get into the AI world as well. So something like Telium will give you predictive decisioning capabilities. Well, that's fine, but it does need training. So therefore, you need to be able to use the platform to set up the model that you want, to train the model with the data that it needs, and then go on to activate it. So again, it does require time and effort. And this, another platform, is this really worth it? Well, if you're going to do this seriously and take it seriously, yes. But the point I'm trying to make is that it does require time and effort. You're not just going to buy something like a Telium or a Bloomreach and install it and just think it's going to work out of the box. It's like a website or an email platform. It needs management. It needs someone to look at it and also work out what data and why we want to put into it and get out of it as well. So if we take, I guess, sort of bringing all that together, if we take this is the model from Tedium, which is the platform we're probably most familiar with. On the left, you can see the different channels that we are collecting event data from. So I think in Tedium they call it event stream, but basically all the events that a user is triggering as they go through their journey through email, websites, paid media potentially as well. We're capturing all of that. We're aggregating it all. We're putting it into a data layer, standardizing as much as possible. Excuse me. And then we're putting it into Tedium's engine, at which point we're enriching it. So if we've got a user who's got a profile within Telium, we can see that they've engaged with a paid advert and that they've gone on to purchase the website. Well, we're capturing all of that information within Telium and we're marking that user now as, for example, a recently purchased user. What that means is that on the right-hand side of this diagram, where we're actually activating that data, well, we could be activating it for personalization. So we could be saying, well, thank you for buying from us. Here's some other things you might be interested in. That's just on the website. We could also be suppressing promotional email comms to them about the product they just bought because they've just bought it. And we could equally be suppressing paid ads to that user. So there's an operational and budget efficiency side of this as well. And the benefit of aggregating this data about a user across all these channels is that we can activate it, but also use that activation in slightly more nuanced ways to save ourselves some money, for example. So we can manage all of this within Tedium's engine, and we can anonymize data if we need to. We can try to match user data together. We can do things with anonymous users as well as known users. So it's a hugely powerful engine. So we've got the collection, basically, the processing, and then the activation side of it. And that is, in essence, our customer data platform. And like I said, with those pre-built characters that are shuttling data back and forth. And the role of the marketer here is to then configure how they want to, if you like, configure their audience types within the platform. And then just a little bit of a view of how that looks, for example, in Telium and their analytics reporting here. You can see down the right, so they have the concept of badging within Telium, but I think effectively it's given a user a profile. So, we've got various ones here, a window shopper, so someone who's just come to the site to browse around. They might be looking at other competitors. We've got other ones in here like a VIP, so someone who's potentially spent loads of money with us. We might have someone who's made a recent purchase. So we've got badges of all these people. So what we've done when we've created these badges is to create the criteria that says, okay, so for our recent purchase person, about halfway down on the right hand side here, so the criteria for that is a user who has spent money on the website in the last 3 months. So they will then be badged as a recent purchaser. Now they could have multiple badges, of course, but the idea is that, okay, now we've got a very nice clean data set that we've just created through a badge to say if someone's bought from us in the last 3 months, we want to do other things with them. So we might want to then we might want to personalize similar offers or similar products to them on site, or we might want to send out a slightly different email campaign to them. So what we would do is we would send these badges off to our email platform or to our website platform to say, here's the value that you need, and this will pull the list for you to say, okay, so that if I'm looking on the website, creating a personalization rule, I can say, if the Telium badge of this user equals recent purchase made, then show banner C, for example, whatever that might be. So we're starting to use this aggregated data to then drive experiences through our marketing channels. And that's why this is so powerful, because you can give access to this to marketers, and they can make really sort of targeted decisions about how they're going to go after these different types of customers. As you get more advanced, you could be looking at something like Tedium's Predict engine. I'm just concentrating on Tedium because it's a platform that we probably know the longest. Other platforms do obviously exist. But if you wanted to start using Predict, this is their engine where you can start to understand which audience segmentation, categorization you need to build, so you can drive more effective marketing campaigns. And a lot of these platforms will do a lot of this analysis for you. So a lot of that predictive work that would otherwise be quite manual, they'll help to do that. And again, within a CDP, that's really powerful because it's not just looking at website behavior, it's also looking at interactions that users have taken through our other channels as well. And just quickly, I'll just conscious of time, but I've only got a little bit more to go. I'll just say this, understanding the journey is key. So when we're thinking about all this, we need to think about it in terms of the experience we want to serve to our customer. So that's likely to be quite manual if you're not doing anything at the moment. So from a standing start, you might need to do some manual analysis of how people are getting to your website, how they're engaging through your email channels, and so on. What are those key points of interaction? How do we want to profile our users initially? So what do we consider to be important? It could just be something as simple as new versus existing customer, or it could be someone who's purchased in the last year, something like that. And then what experience do we want to serve to them? So we need to define what it is we're trying to do so that we can understand then what data we need to support the journey. So just to take a quick example, let's say we're Vodafone or EE or something like that. We sell mobile phones. We know that people will change their mobile phones every 2 years. And let's say we're selling those phones. I mean, they're selling a new contract effectively. So that the use case here is, I want to target an offer to users who have bought from us in store 2 years ago, and maybe an adjusted offer, maybe something more targeted to those who've engaged with a phone upgrade email in the last 3 months, but not bought anything. Well, immediately we've got a use case there where we've got a little bit of data we need to pull together in order to do it properly, right? So the customer experience you want is actually quite simple. Display an offer on a homepage to this type of user the next time they come to the website. Straightforward. How do we do that? well, okay, I need to go to the CRM team. I need to get a list of people who bought, 20, 24 months ago. So those who are coming up to renewal, for example, or who haven't purchased since. So we need to make sure that those people are removed from the list. We then need to look at our email platform and see who's engaged with those emails about upgrades in the last 3 months. And then we need to go through a deduplication process. So what I'm getting at is that you can see that there's quite a lot of manual work here. Whereas if we could pull this into a customer data platform, this would help us to, I mean, we'd have that data almost on demand if we configured it correctly. So we could pull that list straight away and we could run an email campaign targeting those users. And a customer journey mapping exercise, I talked about this last time, but customer journey mapping is almost defining what the problem is. So you've probably seen these customer journey maps where we're talking about awareness consideration, what steps are they going through? They're clicking on emails or going through paid media, looking on the website. But the customer journey map is just defining the problem, really. That's the current state. If we stick with current state, we're never going to grow. So it's the problem we've got to fix. So where are the problems in this journey? And the journey orchestration is the solution. So again, the whole theme of this webinar series is around how we orchestrate this journey to solve friction points, to get data into the right place so we can use it at the right time. So being able to understand ultimately what data does our experience need to serve is really what we're getting to with all this. And something else, if you weren't on the webinar last time, I mean, we'll share this recording anyway in the deck if you want to see it. But at a high level, a service map like this that allows us to map the journey that a user goes through. So what are they thinking at each stage of the journey? What channels are in play? What activities do we want to do through those channels? And who needs to do those? So in this case, we've got various channel owners, CDP people, we've got agencies involved. But creating a service map gives us the ability to understand now, okay, so we're trying to target this user, this is how we're trying to target them, and therefore this is the data we need to get from A to B in order to do it. So this is really the sort of, if you like, the forget technology for the first month, let's just map this out and make sure we understand it in detail, then work out how we're going to service it and then data that needs to support it. And just finally, I'm going to touch on master data management. So it's often called the single source of truth, but it's often not, because master data management can involve different platforms. I mentioned earlier that so you could have a CRM and that could be your master data management platform. You could have a data lake, or you could have different types of master data management like SAP or whatever else you might have in the business. So it's not always the single source of truth. And as a marketer, we don't need, or we shouldn't need to really care about this. This is an organizational wide issue. This is an IT issue. We know what we need to get from it, and potentially what we can work out what we need to send back into it. But this is a program level type piece of work that is going to involve multiple different stakeholders. It's difficult to influence. It takes years potentially. All we're interested really as a marketer is that we want to get X, Y, Z data out of it in order to do what we need to do as part of our jobs. And you've probably heard of the data lakes, for example. They can still be swamps. Data lakes are not necessarily the elixir that's going to solve all the organizational data problems. They're often fragmented, inconsistent, duplicated. They're only as good as the information that goes into them. And if we're sending them duff information, well, that's fine. We're consolidating it all into one place, but that doesn't mean we're actually solving the problem of inconsistency. It just means that we've dumped it into one massive storage that we can connect some of our channels and platforms to. So we're kind of part of the way there, but we're not quite all of the way there. And just an example of what I mean. So I saw something a few months ago that someone showed this in an actual platform, but it was great because it sort of brought it home. So you've got a CRM record of a user and then an email record of a user. Now, our CRM record, so for me, it might be Steve Renshaw, my email address, steve@Ratio Partners, my phone number, and Ratio Partners is my company name. Now, my email record might be slightly different. So I might have used my full email address rather than my shortened email address. And I might have just called the company Ratio because I was doing it on my phone. I couldn't be asked to type out the whole, company name, as most people probably would. So immediately we've got the same person, but we've got inconsistency in data. Now, if we put both of those records into our data lake, well, okay, we've now got more data in there, but my CRM record, Steve Renshaw, might be someone who looks like they've spent £1 million over the last 12 years, whatever. Our email record might be showing me as just a complete non-entity because I've not spent anything because everything's connected to my CRM record. Now, but email record is where I store my marketing preferences. So actually, that's really rich information to target me based on my ever-changing, wants and desires. So it's really important that we have a way of merging those, and we have deduplication of data, and also permissions and everything else, so that we can make sure that we're looking at a true representation of our user. So how do we do that? Well, there are tools that sit on top of data lakes. So again, not to go too technical and start throwing more platforms at you, but as a marketer, going back to what I said, we just care about having clean permissions and accurate data so we can do our campaigns properly, we can activate our journey orchestration strategy and deliver growth for the business. That is our job. So there are things that can do this. So there's a product, for example, again, one of many, but there's one product called Clued In. So if you've got things like those email addresses across different areas of the business, well, we can start to create rules, and there's a bit of data stewardship involved with all this, and a bit of AI potentially, and a bit of manual intervention, and there's a whole webinar you can do just on this. But the fundamental point is that you can start to look at consistent points within data and then start to work out, okay, so if I've got a Steve and a steve.renshaw at ratiopartners.co.uk, we can make a pretty good guess, given they've got the same name, same company name, maybe same location or IP or whatever it might be. We can bring all that information together. We can start to create consistency in our data and create true consolidated records. So these kind of tools like Clued In are really, really important for data cleansing, because they'll help bring all this together and avoid that issue of fragmentation. And again, another platform, it needs some investment. It could take a month or two to get this going. And it's probably more of an IT-led initiative, but it's to make you as a marketer aware that if people are saying, well, the data lake doesn't work for us, then, well, there are solutions to some of these challenges that I've talked about. And again, Clued In, for example, can look at multiple different data sources about a customer. So you'll be familiar with, a CRM system that can go off and look at company information and bring those back and so on. Well, something like Clued In can do that across multiple different data sources. It can query internal and external data sources, and it can make sure that you've got as accurate representation of a customer as is possible by merging and cleansing and unifying that data. So that's a very, very quick whistle-stop tour on master data management in a nutshell. But I thought it'd be useful to show this, because this is often something that marketers don't get too involved with, but it's nice to have an understanding of how it works and what you need from it, and what you could potentially do to help get what you need from it by talking about some of this stuff. I'm 40 minutes in, so I'm going to finish there. So just to summarize what we talked about today, just to go through this, I've got my animation slightly out of kilter, sorry about that. But the power of connected and cleansed permission data is really, really powerful. And it doesn't, once you've got something like a CDP in place, it doesn't take a lot to actually get much closer to that, increased maturity path that you need in order to start leveraging it properly across your channels. That doesn't mean to say that you can't start with manual integration, and the investment in linking up just email and website, for example, or CRM and website, just to prove the business case. It can be a fairly rapid proof of concept type of project, and make the case for the more significant investment in something like customer data platform. But if you are going to scale it, you are going to invariably need some sort of middleware in there. A customer data platform is invariably going to be in there once you start trying to connect 2 or 3 or more platforms. It's just going to save you so much time and effort and money. But it does require investment. Like I said, in any other platform, it requires investment, time, money, also training. You don't want to treat this as a side project. It's got to be someone who product owns it, who understands it, and you might even need technical assistance with it as well. So you might have an agency involved with it. So it is something that's not just something you can just plug and play most of the time. It needs setup. It needs the right data. It needs connectivity with other platforms, and that needs just thought and process. And finally, like I said, I touched on master data management. again, just to say, it's probably not something you'll have too much influence over if you're within the marketing team, but being able to understand how it works and what its pitfalls are can then help you to illustrate to the business what you need to get out of it, and some of the things that potentially they need to think about when providing that data to you. So I hope it wasn't too dry. Like I said, data in the context of marketing can be exciting, but once you get into the details, it can be soul destroying as you go too far down any of these rabbit holes. But hopefully, it's given you enough of an inspiration to understand where potentially you are on the scale of maturity, and what you might want to look at tackling next, and maybe some names of platforms I've thrown in. There might be things that you want to look at as well. We will be doing another one of these webinars in the series, and we'll be looking a bit more at the practical applications of crafting experiences based on this data and based on the building blocks that we talked about in the first webinar. So I hope you'll join us for that when the invite goes out over the next week or so. And yeah, other than that, wish you all a great day, and we'll share the recording round after this. So thank you very much.